back when I was working on this and they'd made another run after I said no to the head of Army Intelligence when they wanted to buy my silence with $2 billion in slush fund money, I was taken to the Wrigley Mansion in Phoenix one night, and it was a late night meeting, maybe 10, 11 o'clock, and there was a whole group of people. It was like a conference for boardroom in this mansion. And around the table were a whole bunch of suits, and most of them were corporate, a couple government. And they say basically to me, you know, they said, you don't need to bother with someone like the president or the CIA director. They don't know anything, and they're not going to know anything. You need to be meeting with people like, well, us, who do WFO, work for other programs for the government. And there are certain orders of Jesuit priests who are involved with technology transfer policy. I said, what? I thought they were on drugs. And it turned out every word they said was true, and I was just listening. Be an interesting movie, wouldn't it? Anyone has cojones to do it. Then they started, this one guy pulled me aside, and he said, you know, we've checked you out. You're a doctor. You have good credit, good income. Take out as many platinum cards as you want. Give them to me. We will then zero out the account balances every month. So you can spend several $1 million a month, and we'll just zero it out. Now, you put me under sodium penalty. This actually happened. And I said, well, then you would own me, wouldn't you, Jim? He says, oh, don't look at it that way. We're here trying to help you. I said, no, you would own me. This is fraud, banking fraud. And he says, no, well, you know, just look at it as a friendly hand helping you out. I mean, it's friendly, you know, devil with forked tongue. And then he started to explain. He says, you know, there are a lot of creative ways where we can get money when we need to. And this guy headed up some folks who do the backup computers for the banking system. And these are big supercomputers. And basically, when you have trillions of dollars daily going back and forth in currency exchange and transactions, there's an odd amount left over that's less than a penny, or less than a euro, or less than a yen. That gets dropped into a black fund account. And it's a lot of money. It adds up on a daily. If you take 365 days in a year, you've got a lot of money from that. It becomes billions, tens of billions. So you have the black budget, unacknowledged projects. You have the corruption and fraud within the government system. You have the productization, monetization of things that we're paying for the study that they then monetize, like integrated circuits and cell phones and fiber optics. Then you have the banking corruption. And then you have the pièce de résistance. And the one that is the most disturbing, and that's drug trade. So the worldwide drug trade is cash and carry, bigger than oil. And when I first heard this from an attorney who was representing a man's family whose husband, a Marine colonel, was murdered because he saw them offloading drugs at a military base in California, I thought this was a bridge too far. I did not actually believe it. And this attorney, a very, very credible guy, Harvard Law, was representing the family to get them to exhume the body because the body was, the death was deemed a suicide. And the family knew the man had been murdered because of what he saw, because he had told one family member what he saw. And he was at the wrong place at the wrong time in a restricted landing area, in a restricted facility, where one of our aircraft was offloading a large amount of drugs that would then be sent out through various drug cartels and whatnot. And they killed him because of what he saw. Made it look like a suicide. And I filed that away as data point 1. Then I had another data point come in of a woman who owned a 5,000-acre sheep ranch in South Dakota, of all places. But adjacent to it was what had been a chemical weapons storage area and an underground facility. And she had enough resources that she had her own people go out with night scopes and found that there were ARVs, so-called alien reproduction, these man-made anti-gravity things going in and out of this facility, wee hours of the morning. And then she got someone close enough who saw that they were offloading huge amounts of chemical weapons, armaments, and drugs. So arms shipping as well as drug shipping. She contacted Senator Daschle, the senior senator of South Dakota, who started digging into it. He got threatened personally. I have a whole dossier file on this in my vault. And he backed off of it. He ran from it light year. He had the speed of light to get away from it because they made it very clear, stay away from this. Senator Daschle, he said, I can't help you anymore. So she reached out to me saying, can you help me? Because part of what was happening is that some of these chemical weapons that were stored there were leaking into not only the groundwater, and where her sheep, and a lot of them were dying. And it was like these containers that were corroding. It was like the Superfund site, but classified. It was a disaster. And that's why she was so concerned. She had 5,000 acres. And I said, look, I'll make some calls and see what I can do, but I've got a heavy lift here I'm doing on my own besides your sheep. But this is a very real case. Then on the day after I met with and briefed the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I got a cryptic invitation from two men. My wife and I call them Mr. Allen 1 and Mr. Allen 2. So not their name. It was our code name. I don't want to talk about who they actually are until they're deceased. I can confirm they're deceased. And they invited me over to this condo in Crystal City near National Airport, which turned out was the home of a former congressman who was sort of a consigliere and sort of advisor to George H.W. Bush. And in the room with him was a burly man who was a Science Applications International Corporation executive who was living virtually in retirement exile in France, who had come in for the meeting. And it was shocking what I learned, but not so shocking given what I've just told you. But they said, do you understand how dangerous this group is? I said, yes, I do, personally. And they said, but do you understand what they're really doing? They're destroying our world. They're destroying our planet. They're destroying our country. And these are the ones that have gotten off the reservation even from George H.W. Bush and have escaped control. Gangland style. I said, yeah, I know that there are special compartmented operations that are unacknowledged that aren't even under the control of MAGIC anymore, M-A-J-I-C. They said, yes, there's a big one, and it deals with drugs. He says there is an army of 8,000 men that are special operations folks. And they said that they move drugs all over the world and the country. And we have killed 2,000 of them, murdered them, thrown them out of helicopters, missing in action, because of minor infractions in security, or a hint that there might be. 2,000 of the 8,000. And they began to describe this program in detail, and I listened. And they said, so this is part of the problem you're dealing with. And by the way, to connect the dots, this is why we don't have legalization or decriminalization of drugs, which every health policy person knows. You can buy anything on the streets of any little town in America. It needs to be, it needs to be something where there's treatment, education, and what have you. But if it was made legal, you would take away an enormous part of the funding for this criminal cartel. And it is the biggest criminal enterprise in the world. So one of my attorneys said, what you're really describing is a transnational RICO, racketeering, influence, corrupt organization. I said, yes, of course. He says, well, civilians can mount outside of the government a proceeding against using the RICO statutes, basically, which was set up for the mafia. I said, yeah, if you know an attorney that has the courage to do it, let me know. And this gets into something else that could be done. And with the information that we have and the people that could be asked about, and that is a major investigation with a Whistleblower Act result. What do I mean by that? The Federal Whistleblower Act allows for someone to blow the whistle on illegal and corrupt activity, and what is recovered or exposed through that whistleblower, the whistleblower gets a percentage of. In this case, we'd be talking about billions of dollars. So if there's a legal team that wants to head this up, and some more whistleblowers that we can put together, that's how you could fund the Energy Lab, but it would be a very big lawsuit and project. It can be done if there's anyone who has the wherewithal to do it. I've mentioned this to a few attorneys, and then when they find out who you're really taking on, they go, no thanks, no thanks, no thanks. So it's all about courage. You have the courage to take on this sort of Fourth Reich that's really running these projects, this neo-fascist transnational security state. But that is another big part of the funding mechanism. And there are others, but these are the big pillars of how you get funding for an unacknowledged special access